Don't forget to join us on February 17th. We're going to be going live with the Godless Granny at 3:30 Central on YouTube. Welcome to another conversation with the Apostate Sisters. I'm Patti, and I'm here with my sister Nancy. We grew up in a doomsday cult called the Worldwide Church of God. We are also nerdy about history and culture, but we're critical of religion. So get ready to get mad or to nod your head in agreement as we talk about today's topic. And today's topic, if you grew up as repressed as we did, we just might make you blush as we talk about things of a sexual nature. Maybe you still struggle with your own body image and your capacity for pleasure. If your sexuality, your sexual self, has been damaged by the rules you were taught and honestly threatened with as a child, all against a cultural background of toxic purity culture, or you know someone else affected by their experience with those things, join us. And please become a part of the conversation. Nancy and I only have our stories, and we know you're out there and you've been hurt. Let's stand for each other, with each other, and heal. So I'm guessing this won't be the one and only episode about sexuality and purity culture that we do. So today we're going to start with looking at the messages we received as little girls growing up, not only as members of the Worldwide Church of God, but also from the culture at large. Let's look at how we can see the influence of those messages on our life choices over the decades. We're going to unpack the bullshit and put ourselves back in control of our own story.
Hey Pats, how you doing today?
Pretty good. I not sure how to feel about today's topic, to be honest.
This is kind of a broad discussion here. We're talking bodily autonomy, maybe a little bit of purity culture, things like
Mhm.
sexual assault and abuse, the so-called traditional roles of women in the family and as wives and so on, especially when they're real young, things that they are taught when they're children and in their teen years. So let's dissect, shall we? First of all, I think bodily autonomy, I've always thought just pertained more to things like maybe abortion.
I guess when I think of bodily autonomy, I'm generally thinking of, the first thing that comes to my mind is forced routine circumcision of infant baby boys, which is
Oof.
also its own topic and
Hmm.
needs addressing because that's some bullshit that should not be happening anymore. And I have very strong feelings about that.
So in the Worldwide Church of God, I mean, their stance was generally one that was, of course, a patriarchal. And Herbert W. Armstrong, his interpretation of the Bible was to set up the man as the head of the household. I know that's not solely within the Worldwide Church of God, where the woman was just expected to submit. That came with a lot of restrictions on women that you would assume they would have gotten harder and harder to uphold as the 1950s came around. And then here, times are changing. I even remember something about women not being allowed to wear makeup in church.
I remember that makeup was a complete no-no. I remember mom didn't wear makeup. We weren't allowed, not even in play. I remember being really bad one time and being at a friend's house and getting to play with her play makeup and not getting it washed off enough before I came home and getting busted.
Oh,
For some
geez.
reason, it was a really big deal that I would adorn myself.
Kids like to play with, I was going to say girls, not necessarily all girls, maybe boys like to play
Sure.
with makeup too. I
It
think that that
changed
was
though.
really important
Oh, yeah, I agree. I thought it was really
to be able
important
to
too.
do.
Well, it's a part of how kids start to conceptualize being grown-ups, right? It's
Hmm.
like playing with baby dolls or having a, whatever play set for whatever kind of job. It's a kid pretending they're older and seeing what it's like, dreaming a little bit.
And did the church give, do you remember if they gave any explanation on why women were not allowed to wear makeup? My only assumption can be that I seem to remember mom saying we should not look older. Why would you want yourself to look older? And maybe it had something to do with making sure you don't have a lure to the opposite sex?
I have a feeling it was a little bit along the lines of not like trying to show your wealth or something.
That could be too.
1 Peter 3, 3 through 4. Do not let your adorning be external, the braiding of hair, the wearing of gold jewelry, or the clothing you wear, but let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart with the imperishable beauty of gentle and quiet spirit. All these things in the Bible is like some of them aren't so bad. It's like, well, yeah, do I agree that maybe we should, have our greatest beauty be our kindness and stuff? Like, yeah, probably. And probably not like wear a bunch of gold and shit when we've got neighbors living on the street. So I'm for that. But I do think but it was also a separating out of the women who were part of God's true church from women who were in other evangelical movements or of the world, right? Because I mean, women in evangelical movements for a while, it was like the more makeup, the better. And they had a saying, the higher the hair, the closer you are to God. Good old 1980s. A lot of the things the Worldwide Church of God did was to separate us out from other churches and the people of the world.
More like elevate, not separate.
That's a good point. I remember that early on. So I'm not sure how everyone changed their notions around that, but somewhere before I turned 12, for sure, that had changed.
How did you know? Did they officially say that was no
Yes.
longer a law?
Yes, it was very overt. And it was like, oh, now the women are allowed to wear makeup. It was a thing. And I
Hmm.
remember our mom at least was willing and did, but talked heavily about how important it is to wear makeup that looks natural, which, hey,
Yeah. Okay.
that's fine. I can get on board with that. But also, I
Mm-hmm.
can get on board with very bright and artistic makeup. So I don't know. I remember being so freaking excited when we were allowed to wear makeup because, of course, as a kid, as I said, I loved the idea of wearing makeup.
Mm-hmm.
But then we took it really slow in our family. I don't know what happened for you, but for me, it was very heavily gatekept, the makeup I was allowed to wear. So, like at age 12, I could wear nail polish. At age 13, I could wear lipstick, but not bright lipstick. At 14, I could wear mascara, I think. And then by 16, it was like, well, you're 16. So whatever.
Oh, weird, Patty. I
And
don't
honestly, by
remember those
16, I wouldn't
specifics.
have listened anyway. So what?
Well, true. Like you were a black sheep or something, Patty.
I do think, though, that those things didn't change. It was definitely after Armstrong died. I think he kept a pretty tight grip on it until then.
Yes, it started becoming more lax after he passed away. Yep.
Right. But isn't it strange that here, all the way up into the 80s, he was trying to keep women being so conservatively dressed and not makeuped and all of these things. Meanwhile, the 80s was about as like skimpy, makeuped, big hair,
Yes.
black, see-through, whatever, fluorescent things. I mean, it became more and more apparent that his way of doing things was opposite of the current culture, which he probably liked, but it made it to everyone else look like it was
Mhm.
passing.
He was still in the 30s, Patty.
He was, yes.
Or excuse me, late 1800s.
Maybe. I know. Well, yeah.
I've always been kind of a tomboy, so maybe that just wasn't a thing for me. Where you liked a lot of those more feminine things like makeup. And I never had, a lot of friends growing up.
I mean,
So
I have to think that at least in part I was socially conditioned to want those things though too. The
of course.
makeup, the pantyhose, the social conditioning, and in part the idea that it was made clear to me that I wouldn't grow up doing adulty things seemed like that forbidden fruit that I'd never get to have. And so I wanted to do everything that was as close to grown up as I could because I knew I wasn't going to grow up.
I remember you saying that, and that is so deep, and it sounds so tragic at the same time.
I need to like go back and talk to my little child self within and let her know she'll make it and she'll grow up.
That is
She's gonna be
heart-wrenching.
44 and saggy someday. It's okay.
Well, Pats, I think she'd be proud of what she became. So,
Oh, thanks. I hope she thinks so too. So it's interesting though that we were mentioning 1800s because I actually do think if we want to talk about where Herbert W. Armstrong's ideals came from, I mean, he came out of kind of a Quaker movement, which is pretty closely linked still to like the original Puritans that arrived here. So, I mean,
yes.
he brought all of that into the 20th century, unfortunately. He wasn't the only one. But
Right.
so, yeah, I mean, it was funny how then his puritanical ideas still tended to match with the purity culture that was growing in the US at that time.
And I didn't realize that the term purity culture was more of sort of a 1990s movement.
Yeah.
Here, I thought that was just something from the beginning of time, but it really was like a legit like fad or a movement that girls were like, "Oh, I'm going to save myself for marriage and I'm going to save my first kiss for when I get married too. Why not? Let's give our glory to God." It was a youth movement, and I didn't realize that was more of an evangelical and I think Catholic thing as well. Like I feel like Catholics also participated to a certain extent, maybe not under that term of purity
Right.
culture, but it may have kind of gradually started in the 80s, went into the 90s, and it had like this strong emphasis on sexual abstinence before marriage, which is exactly what you and I were taught as children. I remember mom saying to me, well, dad too, that my body is for my husband that I'm going to
Ugh.
marry today. And somehow I got the notion that God had selected who that was for me. And so I don't do things like touch myself, I don't draw attention to myself, and just kind of keep myself pure. Like it wasn't any sort of discussion on things like safe sex practices, STDs, any sort like relationship abuse and being taken advantage of, the whole rape culture. And it would have been nice to know those kinds of things so that we could distinguish between the two. If we're just taught, you're supposed to do what God tells you to, well, how in the fuck are we supposed to interpret something like that? If something is going on in my life, here I am 17 years old out on my own, and all these dudes try to sleep with me. What's going on? And like, how do I wasn't taught about the real world and protecting myself and what safe sex is. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Nancy, that's huge. Uh, what an interesting difference between how each of us related to that conditioning, because mine was so strong and like went to the core of lake of fire and eternal damnation and whatever kind of stuff for
Mm-hmm.
engaging in sexual things. And so that kept me away from those things, but maybe to a fault to where it was more like having trouble connecting to my own body, even once I was married in like a God sanctioned situation, but I'd locked these things away so much because I had to. I was taught to.
Well, and it's not like you looked at your body with any sort of positive view. And then when these boys are giving you attention, oh, they think you're pretty and they want to be with you and they start moving things along a little bit too fast. I wasn't taught that, hey, sometimes boys just want you for sex and then they don't even want to talk to you after that.
I feel like
No
that's all
one
I
taught
was
me
taught.
that.
What the
That's,
heck? I feel like that's
I
the
don't
only thing
remember
I ever
that.
heard. But you just got the abstinence only. Okay, I wanted to make a point about the abstinence only thing. So
Yes.
that fully crossed over into politics to
Mm-hmm.
where like the Rush Limbaugh era of the conservative side of things was, and they got themselves into high places of government, right? When Bush
Right.
was in, we had, which I don't remember which Bush, there was a Surgeon General. Is that the term? Like the top medical person in the country? Like there was a big battle over whether to give out condoms and teach safe sex in schools with the folks who were like, no, we should be teaching abstinence. And that
Mm-hmm.
caused a big rift. But I think in the more conservative areas where they did teach abstinence only, it caused exactly the things you're talking about. It caused way more teen pregnancy, way more STDs, but people getting sexually assaulted because they were not informed.
They didn't know how to stand up for themselves and they didn't know the difference between sex and love can be very different things. Sometimes they do not go together. That's a concept I just did not get, and we really weren't taught about dating through the church either, aside from the fact that our parents thought the world was going to end and we probably wouldn't even make it to the point of getting married. But
Right.
just dating in general, how it works and what's a healthy relationship and what's not. It was either dating was strictly forbidden or it had these very strict rules surrounding it. It was like in an effort for the churches to stop their children and teenagers from having premarital sex, which of course Christians believe is a sin. That's where purity culture comes in. Like
Hmm.
there, I don't remember when the book came out, but I remembered, back when I was an evangelical, so quote unquote, hanging out with that sort of crowd. I was in the military, I was in an MLM, selling Amway, going to a mega church. I mean, fuck Patty, I was right in it. Even though I didn't like believe in any of this crap, I was still in it, just kind of taking mental notes. And I'm like, these people actually believe this shit. But I did pick up a lot of things and, knowing what not to do. There was this book that people kept talking about. It was called I Kissed Dating Goodbye. And the author, I guess, advocated for a period of courting, so to speak, as like an evaluation method for marriage.
Yeah, that book. So during my stint of evangelicalism, once the Worldwide Church of God kind of crumbled, or
Mhm.
our branch of it did anyway, I got sucked into evangelicalism, not realizing I could just not be religious. And so that book, I Kissed Dating Goodbye, kind of had a big effect on me. Technically, I didn't have sex till I got married. My kid's in the other room
What do
listening.
you mean technically, Patty? What's that about?
Well, we'll get into it. But that book was such a seminal piece for the purity culture at that time in the 90s. And since then, the author of that book has
Mhm.
pulled it from all the publishers and has himself gotten divorced, renounced Christianity, and is like trying to make the world better again after he contributed to fucking it up by writing that book. Yeah.
I had no idea. And that was such a popular book too, Pat.
Oh, it was.
Wow. Like
Yep.
it must have been what, early 2000s or
Yeah,
something.
Josh Harris
Um,
is the author of it.
wow. I had absolutely no idea who did all that. Oh,
Yeah.
and
I
that book
mean,
was so impactful
it was. It might be
on
one of the
people.
reasons that I decided to marry my husband so quick. I mean, I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
we dated for barely 6 months before we were like, let's get married.
Yes. And I'm so glad that it worked out. It worked out
It
great.
did.
You can just never know with a marriage, and it could have gone really horrible for you too if you just don't know someone that well and then you marry them. I mean, in the Bible, it literally tells you, like, if you're feeling lust, you're supposed to just get married so that you can act on that lust. Instead, we're not teaching people about sex and relationships in a healthy way.
Right.
Experimenting, seeing what's out there and knowing the difference, and building up to that. I mean, I couldn't, I don't think I could have been the type of person, I'm sorry, like you. Let's just come out and say it. I mean, we took very different paths in life. The first time you had sex with your husband when you married him. I
Yep.
mean, he hadn't even kissed a woman until he kissed you on your wedding day. So, I mean, wow.
I don't think his other three siblings waited till marriage.
Oh,
Well,
seriously?
we're both the oldest. I feel like that has an impact on it. That
Right.
we like obey the rules because we were the most conditioned to obey and behave as
You
the
told me
oldest kid.
once that, yeah, you told me once that you hate that phrase, being told, like, you're the oldest, so you should know better. Like, you're
I know.
it's supposed to have all the answers because you're influencing us second born children, the middle children, the black sheep. Well, congratulations, Pats, because I got fucked up anyway. So,
Well, right, because then it
oh,
was
it's
put on me. Like, not only did my behavior affect me, but if my behavior was bad, then I was responsible for the sinning of my siblings or whatever.
that's pretty disgusting. Yeah.
Boo on that.
I don't like that at all. So I'm glad you brought that to my attention too. So I knew, yeah, you don't teach an oldest kid like you, they learn from you. Like, well, then you better teach them. Then you are the parent, not the older sibling. I'm happy it worked out for you. I mean, I'm happily married now. Definitely wasn't for a long time, to be perfectly honest. You name it, and I've probably done it. But whatever, that was the path I had to take, to get where I am now. Had I married someone that my parents wanted me to? No. Absolutely not. I would have been miserable. And so what do I do? I marry someone from clear on the exact opposite end of the earth in South India who was raised Hindu. And like, I don't think I could have gotten more rebellious than that.
I know. Good job, you.
I remember when I told our parents that I was just starting to date my husband and how excited I was of how it was going. It felt very different from any in the past. And I remember mom talking about things like ISIS and how I should be careful of some of those terrorist organizations out there. Patty, that was the moment she heard that he was from India. I'm not kidding you.
Wait. India. And she
Mhm.
cites something about ISIS?
Correct.
That's not even the same continent.
Well, I don't think our mother knows anything about it, Patty. She's just
It's brown
collect
skin. That's what she was responding to was brown
was
skin
what?
people. Brown skin people.
Yeah.
Ugh, ha, ha, ha.
Yes. I don't know. I remember sharing with them that I was getting married and I didn't even really get that much of like a happy response back. I guess it is what it is. It's a duty and I'm marrying someone they didn't want me to. So probably for you, it's a lot better. I mean, your husband being a white Christian at the time, not anymore. But I think he ticked a lot more boxes.
Oh, yeah, at the time. I mean, we still had our wedding at a time when they were at a religious festival that they wouldn't not
Hmm.
do in order to come to my wedding, but I wasn't going to
Ah,
change my wedding. I wasn't going to start my married life kowtowing to Herbert W. Armstrong's special days.
I remember that your wedding coincided with the, what was it, Feast or Tabernacles when they
Yep.
go somewhere. And so they didn't even come to your wedding. Well, they didn't come to my high school graduation either. So, I mean, we've lost out on a lot of that kind of thing, the support that we needed in our adult lives, and we've done it on our own. But yeah, getting back to like marriage, I wanted to talk about this concept of like giving away the bride. I don't know if that's really a concept anymore, but the whole a guy kind of needing to ask the girl's father for permission to marry her and how sick I think it is for the father to give away the bride. Again, that just goes back to what we were talking about with bodily autonomy and that violation of like seeing a woman as property. So she is property belonging to her father until the father gives her away to the husband. Like, okay, now she is your property. Am I looking at that wrong, or is that how you see it too?
Oh, yeah, that's entirely how that was set up and why it was done that
Hmm.
way. I would like to think that most of the time it's not thought of in that way now. It's just we're kind of like pantomiming that tradition at this point. But yeah, it's hard to know. I think that's exactly what it was, and I think we can take that directly from the Old Testament as to why it was thought of that way, you know?
Well, and there are a lot of passages out there that would make it seem like women are property, especially to either her father or her husband. For example, I know in the Old Testament when it comes to things like property rights, in Genesis 3:16, it says your desire will be for your husband and he will rule over you. I believe that was something that God said to Eve. Is that correct?
Yeah,
After
and I
he
mean,
was
right there,
created.
it sets up the power dynamic right from
Mhm.
the beginning. Well, and the fact that she was supposedly made from him, not made of the earth like he was.
Yeah, there's quite a few. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is be praised. Blech. Okay. Isn't that gross?
I
Yes.
wanted to mention Exodus 20:17 though, which is sort of listed as the 10th commandment, but as we learned in our Bible quiz episode, it may not officially be the 10th commandment, but it's the one we all know. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his male servant or his female servant or his ox or his donkey or anything else that is your neighbor's. Well, guess what that's saying? By the exact way that's written, it's saying a wife is literally just listed among the possessions of the neighbor that shouldn't be coveted. So, hello, that's just categorizing her as part of the property. And we know
Exactly.
that too. Like, we know that anthropologically speaking, we know that women were treated and traded like property in that era when the Old Testament would have been being written.
And they're still treated as property. It's just not maybe as blunt or direct as it used to be, but it's still there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I do have one more in the Old Testament. Okay, in Deuteronomy 22:28 and 29. If a man meets a virgin who is not betrothed and seizes her and lies with her, and they are found, then the man who lay with her shall give to the father of the young woman 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife because he has violated her. He may not divorce her all his days. Now, straight up, this is a transactional thing, right? She's been devalued
Mhm.
because she's been poked, so
Yep.
she gets less money. or
Right.
whatever. She's not worth as much, so he's got
Mhm.
to make up the difference. However, this particular passage gets very debated between apologists and critical scholars. Because of the seizes her, some will say
Mhm.
that clearly this is a against her will kind of rape situation. But then the line, and they are found, apologists are like, well, that means that she was there willingly. So this is a passage that gets pulled and twisted any old way you want. But what we cannot gloss over is the fact that there is a monetary transaction around this woman and her value as a
Mhm.
person.
Marrying her rapist. Well, what are they supposed to say aside from, and they are found? If you go and you see the two people, you're to say, yep, they're found. It doesn't mean the woman was there willingly.
There's even a passage that's something like, if she doesn't cry out.
Right. We covered that in our Bible quiz through
Yeah.
Freedom from Religion Foundation recently.
Well, so then I think you'll get a lot of, on the evangelical side, folks who are like, well, but that was Old Testament. We're under the new covenant now. It's like, okay, well, get ready. Because have you read the New Testament? Probably not. But we're looking, we can just go straight into Ephesians 5:22 to 24. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Hmm.
Submit. It's always about
I mean,
submission.
there's nothing in here in the good book at all to indicate it's a partnership. Uh,
No, it's never been a partnership,
mm-mm,
has it?
mm-mm. There is one more I'll read. 1 Corinthians 7:4. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does.
Ugh.
Likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Now, while I can appreciate that this one at least shows the possession
Hmm.
going both ways, I'm still not for this. I really think
No.
the only
Mm-mm.
one who should have authority over my body is me. And if I'm choosing to temporarily give up authority by submitting to,
Mhm.
handcuffs or rope, that is still within my own bodily autonomy because there needs to be trust in those situations and safe words.
Yes, if people are all about BDSM, go for it. But you give that choice. I
Right.
mean, this is,
In that culture, it is said that folks who take the role of a submissive in those types of adult play situations are actually the ones in charge. And that's
yeah.
understood by the adults in that type of play.
Yeah, you can submit if it's your choice. I mean, the whole point of bodily autonomy, I mean, it means that your body is your own. It's only for you unless you choose to share it. In this case, if you want to submit to that person, fine. Make sure, yes, like you said, there is trust there. But it's also about having your own power, agency, your own dignity, and having the choice. If your choice is stripped from you, that's when you become property. And I mean, bodily autonomy is like the foundation for gender equality. It's a fundamental right. It's all about self-ownership and determination. It's quite a broad topic, but this absolutely goes against it. And that's interesting though, Pats, that you said in the Bible, there are no examples of a healthy together partnership in marriage. It's always like the man is the head of the household and he's got ownership. He's going to make all the decisions. Like, okay, we don't have bodily autonomy on our own.
The really sad thing is that there are still women who are younger than me, women in their, 20s and 30s, here
Hmm.
thinking that they're doing God's will and still behaving in this way and like putting out videos about needing to be extra modest. And it's just weird.
And it's very harmful. There are so many dangerous effects of things like sexual repression and lack of bodily autonomy. I mean, when young women are told that their bodies do not belong to themselves and they belong to either a god that maybe you don't believe in or their future husband or current husband, they can become so vulnerable to things like believing that their value is only as property to someone else and that they have to subjugate their own physical, mental, emotional well-being to the needs of, might I say it, I mean, potentially controlling or abusive partners. How are they
Oh,
going to
for
know the
sure.
difference? It's even caused a lot of women to feel shame with their bodies and have low self-esteem. I know I did. How about you, Pats?
For me, the biggest thing was I didn't know how to find value in myself if I wasn't getting good grades and also being thought of as pretty and getting
Oh,
attention of boys. Because that's how I was raised, that I would need to
hmm.
grow up and I'd need to find myself a husband, and that was kind of the most important thing. And
Yep.
so I spent all of my attention trying to figure out how that would work.
You had all
What?
three of those things, Pats.
What?
You were smart, you did really good in school, the boys liked you, and you were very pretty. And
Okay.
still
Yeah.
are. Excuse me, still are.
Aw, that's nice of you to say. I mean, I have to own up to some of that privilege, right? I do think that's true,
Mm.
that
Yeah.
being a blonde lady has gotten me some places that I would obviously wouldn't if I was a woman of color or something.
Hmm.
And that's gross that was the reason that other people would be excluded from something. That makes me
Right.
angry, and I don't want it to be that way.
Totally off topic, but I just created a girls' Sunday out event on Facebook, inviting a few of my friends from around town because we haven't really done anything like that. I think it's really important for women to be around each other to talk about things, maybe their relationship, whatever else is going on, whatever, just because we tend to act a little differently when there's no men around. Like, I don't know, it feels safer somehow. But I realized all the women that I invited, they're all from another country. There's one, there's one from Spain, one from Fiji, there's one from Colombia, one from Iran, another from Sri Lanka, another from India. I was looking at this, one's a black girl and one's a trans woman. I was like, wait a minute. I'm the only white American chick in this group. Are you serious? And I hadn't even intended to do that. I just realized that somehow I've attracted all these different types of women to me, and that's kind of my little friend circle. And I love it because then when we get together we talk about different cultures of the world and experiences. We can go back to topics like this and see what the differences and similarities are.
Oh, the female experience around the world.
Yes.
Nancy, I love that.
Yes.
I love your cool girl crew.
I mean, it's like International Women's Day. I'm looking forward to it. It'll be
Yes, I
fun.
love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
But yeah, I think it's important for and people, not, again, not just women. That's a whole nother broader topic, but males can be victims to sexual assault crimes, and I think it's even harder for them to speak out about it, wouldn't you think?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, and then add another layer of the depth of harm that our society's caused, and look at how poorly queer and trans folks are treated in that
Right.
in
Hmm.
that quest for their own bodily autonomy too. When everyone thinks they can fucking legislate their bodies or tell them they aren't allowed to be who they are, that's
Right.
not okay. I just got to always mention that, right? Because I mean, we went through some shit with the church we grew up
Hmm.
in, and we all went through some shit with purity culture and what it did with politics and everything in this country for a while.
Yeah.
But there are definitely some portions of society that have been dealing with things we can't even fathom.
I like to see that it is changing. I think it's slow, but I like to see those changes where people don't look at their bodies with shame and disgust or feel maybe fearful of the opposite sex or their traumas and disconnect from their bodies are coming out.
Yes.
And not understanding how pleasure works and healthy pleasure, the anxiety and tension. It just, another thing I remember as a child was, did mom or dad ever talk to you about not having, like being friends with boys? Because I remember that.
Hmm,
Mm.
not really. When I was 5, this little boy, Michael, at church, there was something going on with me and Michael. Bring his mother's old jewelry and give it to me. And the parents thought, oh, isn't that cute? The
Aw.
two of them. I mean, it was cute looking back, I guess, but also kind of creepy because by the time I came around to my kiddos, I was like, maybe I'm not gonna tease them about a boyfriend or something. I feel like that's
Yeah.
weird and not okay.
With us, it was just kind of forbidden, wasn't it? I don't think it was. I mean, we could hang out in groups, maybe. We do have a brother out there. I mean, growing up, it was mostly me and our brother that I would hang out with. You were too cool to hang out with me, but that's fine. Yeah.
I
You
know
were
you're
doing
still
your own
carrying
thing.
bitterness. That's okay. We can hash it out here on the internet.
That's all right. You were a huge bitch growing up, but that's okay because I know where it came from.
I'm
I was,
sorry, Nancy, for being a huge
oh,
bitch.
pets. It's okay because,
I mean, it's not.
life
That's
turned
why
out
we're
good.
here. That's why we're here. It wasn't okay.
But now we're understanding where it all came from. You had no way to let your anger out, Patty. And usually it's the safe zone where people dump their crap, so to speak.
On
Like
their
with
siblings,
on their siblings, the spouses, family, friends, whatever it may be. It happens.
the people who they
Sometimes,
think they can get away with it, who are going to stick with them even with their big asshole. Yeah.
well, yes. You might not be wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, getting back to that, I mean, male and female friendships, I feel like were pretty forbidden. Or like we were told we couldn't have friends that were guys due to the possibility of it leading to that temptation to fuck, which
That's true.
most of my friends are guys. Even though I just said my little stint of the girls getting together. Yeah, that was a spur of the moment thing here this week. But majority of my friends are dudes. Like I hang out with dudes and I talk like a dude. I burp like a dude. I have absolutely no desire to fuck any of them. And if they do, hey, I can tell you, it's not my problem. It's not my fault if they do. I have nothing to do with it. That's all on them. And I'm not going to go around like trying to get them to want to do that either.
Right.
We're friends, and I don't understand why men and women can't be friends without having some sort of weird sexual tension. It doesn't make sense to me, you know. But
Because
I
the United
people
States began with some puritanical people escaping the wokeism that we called the Enlightenment in Europe. That is why I am convinced of it.
oh my goodness, Patty. Sure, I'll take it. I'll take
That's my grand
it.
theory.
It can go
Someday,
back to
someday when I can be a scholar, I'll prove it.
yes.
I think my favorite sex lecture I got from Dad.
Oh no.
Yep. I think it was at the point that I was actually 16, so it was no longer a secret if I was dating. I didn't have to hide it anymore because they were okay with it at that point. I believe I was saying something about I was just holding hands, Daddy.
Oh.
And the lecture went something like this. Well, do you know what holding hands leads to?
Oh.
Kissing. Do you know what kissing leads to? Necking.
He
That
said,
amazing
"Oh."
necking.
Bleh.
You know what necking leads to? Petting. You know what petting leads to? And anyway, that was basically the entire lecture. And that was
I
the last time I was like willing to talk to him about anything relating to boys. So yeah, no, go away.
talking to dad about relationships anyway. But it wasn't like mom went there either. She never brought anything up.
Oh, I have a bodily autonomy thing. Okay, I'm going to go back in
Yes.
time a little bit,
Okay.
back to about fifth grade. Dad, I will say, has some social struggles. Could I diagnose him with autism? No, probably not. But is there something spectrumy going on there? Yeah,
Mhm.
probably.
Mm, yeah.
So he doesn't always know what's appropriate and what's not, I will say. Also, he was raised, in the 1950s and has been part of this church. So patriarchy, he gets to do what he
Yeah.
wants, kind of is the
Mhm.
general idea.
Right.
Well, so he found out that in fifth grade, I had just gotten myself a trainer bra.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Which was fine and normal and how it all should happen. But of course, he wanted to tease that I didn't need one because I was still flat. Because, hello, a trainer bra is flat. It's a trainer bra. And so he thought he was going to be really funny. And it was Saturday. I was in my church dress and he yanked down the front of my dress, thinking I was going to be wearing a bra. And it wasn't because I was, as I said, flat. So some days I wore it, some days I didn't. And he apologized, but yeah, dude, like even if I was wearing a bra, that would not have been okay. Like I know it was not that many years ago. I was your little daughter running around probably in underpants anyway, but like whoa. Well, I don't think he even understands now that there was a lot of things wrong with doing that. Like, kind of no harm, no foul, but it was like, oh, I think you need to know your place.
But the fact that he thought that was funny.
Well, and then he didn't realize that that would be a disrespectful thing to my bodily autonomy.
Well, he didn't care about bodily autonomy.
No, well, that's
Anyone
true.
in the church never did.
I
So,
mean, any family that's going to pull down their children's pants and spank them with a wooden spoon doesn't understand the first goddamn thing about bodily autonomy.
well, yes, that's true. That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
Another topic for another time. Whew.
Oh
But
my
yes,
gosh. Bodily autonomy is just this amorphous thing with so many different aspects of our
yes.
lives attached to it.
It's like a tree with a lot of branches.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you have more sex stories?
Like masturbation comes to mind too. I know we just watched Godless Granny and her episode on masturbation, which was completely hilarious. She
She's
is
the best.
amazing. Oh, and we're going to be collabing with her pretty soon, so I'm very excited to do that. But her episode, she was saying all the same sorts of things that I was thinking. Like, why are you able to rub one part of your body like rub out a cramp or rub your neck because it feels good? And, like you're getting kinks out, but all of a sudden you're touching your private parts and it becomes a problem.
You're still
Wow.
getting kinks out, am I right?
Well, yeah, you're getting some kinks out. Yeah.
Different kind of kink.
See, I just
That was
never
the joke,
understood.
everyone. That was a pun. That was a pun on the word kink in case you missed it.
We, you just admitted you have a lot of kinks, Pats, and that's totally fine. You're getting your freak on and you're married years here.
Oh, I'm just having fun. We're
Well,
not
well,
nasty
why
at all.
shouldn't you?
Yeah.
Why shouldn't you? You guys are married, you can experiment, you guys are having fun. Even if you weren't married, it's
Well,
entirely
yes.
up to you. If you're both consenting adults, do whatever the fuck you want. I don't know why people have to try and regulate our bodies.
I actually think kinks are a rather important part of the way adults contextualize some of their early childhood traumas.
Right. It's like some of
Then
these
take
men
back
out
their
here.
power. Yeah.
Yeah, because their power was stripped from them, kind of like
Yes.
men who want to be treated like babies in a way, right?
Yep.
Like they act like babies and they'll pay a woman to like take care of them like mommy. Those some serious mommy issues. I'm not saying it's their fault, but I think it definitely coincides with their childhood trauma.
Oh yeah. But I also think it has the power to treat that kind of
Mhm.
trauma. I have a
Mhm.
friend who's a dom, and she definitely is aware that people who grew up Catholic are much more likely to be the ones to use like a spiky kneeling pad as part of their
Mhm.
play. Play.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. I'll take the word play. All right.
I think play is a good word for it. I
Yeah.
mean, think about it. We play when we're children. We play very physically,
Hmm.
right? And we transition where we add words to our play, but like we're still physical creatures, and
Yes. Yes.
that's sort of that next evolution of physical play as different organs, mature and come online.
I like it. And if both partners are happy and satisfied, they want to keep it up, then go ahead. I don't see why that relationship is any like worse off than these quote unquote traditional relationships. And I think especially with women relationship expectations have become a bit distorted, especially amongst young women. Like
Hmm.
they see, of course, they start with what we were talking about. They see marriage as more of a required duty than like this equal chosen bond being with someone that they love. Or I'm okay with people marrying for whatever reason. It doesn't have to be someone they love. I think initially marriage was created not even because someone loved. It was more about like a business partnership.
Oh
But
yeah. Joining of
women
household wealth. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
women are like promised these perfect marriages, perfect families, satisfying sex, and women especially are often disappointed in the outcome. Or I should say everyone.
I don't think when were women promised satisfying sex? I've never heard that.
I mean, I think that might even be more of like a Christian thing. I know when I was in the evangelical church, it's just like, oh, sex is so perfect when it's of God. If it's not of God, you're going to be disappointed. And that's what I took from it. And then you can't tell me all these women are having like amazing, mind-blowing sex, not experimenting, having completely vanilla sex. I mean, to each their own. But again, if that's all you know, what do you have to compare it to? And I'm not
Well,
saying it's a bad thing just to be with one person, but
no, of course not. But if you repressed yourself out of fear for your eternal soul for so
Mhm.
long, it's not like it's just gonna all open up and you can be like a horny slut for your husband or something.
Well, and that's another thing. Women getting these derogatory terms associated with them, like tramp, slut, skank, when all they're really doing is trying to experiment, maybe to discover what they like or just live in sexual freedom. It's very archaic, sexist labels. We get devalued and ruined, but somehow not the men. They get that weird free pass. Well, I should say straight men. I mean, if you're a gay, bisexual man, trans, you still face a lot of
Yeah,
like violence and even death in some cases for expressing who you are in some
right.
places. And then, like, why are we focusing on who a woman sleeps with? Somehow, I feel like the single woman, especially young, attractive ones, are more hated than anyone. Like they're used as objects by a lot of men out there and they're hated, especially by married women. I remember how married women used to look at me when I was single. Like I was not part of the club and I was seen as the enemy. The moment I started dating someone and brought him to church, all of a sudden I was in the club. Oh, we're having this women's social. Come here with us. And like I was seen as the enemy before that happened. It's almost like,
What? Is that your evangelical years?
yes, it was a rough few years.
I think there is well, there's definitely a backlash going on among religious communities around how many young single women are wanting to stay single or at least not have children.
Oh, they hate it. They hate it.
Right. I mean, it's like a backlash against it, thinking women are choosing not to fulfill their God-given roles and shit like that. It's like, well, was God's given role such that half of women would die in childbirth until the last 100 years? Was that a good plan? Did we like that? Hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh, our bodily autonomy is so important. And knowing that if nothing else, if everything is shit, we
Mhm.
should have ourselves. Mm,
It's the only thing that we truly own.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We feel its joy. We feel its pain. We feel everything. No one else does.
I think my own coming of age and moving into my own sexual maturity would have been a lot less traumatic if I hadn't left the cult and decided to shack up with the
Mm.
evangelical movement. I don't know, the purity culture just hit that much harder, I think, right
Right.
at the time that I was actually in that phase of my life. I
Hmm.
mean, I would think I would have felt a lot different about who I was if I wasn't constantly feeling like I was compromising some sort of ideal. If I was with someone when I was with my college boyfriend, feeling like like I was here doing something so wrong by making out and giving blowjobs and stuff. But all those things were with the intention of avoiding what I wasn't supposed to do, which was pee in the
Hmm.
bee, right? Like, oh my gosh, that was like the one little pieces of flesh that couldn't touch for sure.
Right.
And why?
Little flesh, Betty.
Well, okay.
Uh,
Whatever. You know what I'm saying, but
yeah.
Hmm?
I seem to remember some girl you knew in church. I want to say this is all the way back in California too. Think her name was Rachel. There was a couple of guys that you and her were interested in. Apparently, you had gone out and done some things. And I remember her coming back saying how guilty she felt about what she had done with what's his nuts, whoever he was. Do you know
Oh,
who I'm talking about?
I do. I wonder where Rachel is now. Yeah, no, it was at this was Worldwide Church of God days. It
Hmm.
was, I totally forgot about that story. It
I don't
was,
even know what happened that night, but I
oh,
remember
not
her
that
reaction.
much. Well,
Wow.
we were teenagers. Yeah. So there was me and Rachel, kind of, and then this kid, Marco, and his friend. And the four of us went somewhere. But Marco and I were not near Rachel and the dude. But it was like at a Worldwide Church of God, like youth basketball weekend. And we snuck out of the building and like onto the hill behind the school and we're making out. I mean, I think my shirt came up. Ooh, at the time that was a big deal, but ooh,
Awesome.
yeah. I'm pretty sure that was the night that mom was like, I know where you were.
What?
Yes.
She said that.
Uh-huh. I'm like, oh, okay. Did you see my nipples? I didn't actually ask that.
Patty, seriously? The good daughter over here did that and mom caught you?
I guess so. I
Oh
was at
my
least 17 at that point. I didn't give a shit. I was months away from being like, all right, well, we're done here and you have no control over me. Because as soon as I turned 18, I was like, kick me out. Have fun. I'm leaving anyway. You're not supporting me in college, so see you later.
Well, that must have come much later. I don't even remember getting my first kiss till I was 17, and I didn't lose my virginity till I was 18. So I mean, I didn't even experiment like at all. Didn't have all those fun, naughty teenage excursions, I guess. And then from that point until, like late 20s, of like, yeah, it was a roller coaster. I'm just like, oh, I'm free and I'm gonna do whatever I want. And I
Yep.
did.
And you did.
I loved the sexual energy of those years, though. I really did.
Feel like my sexual path was so freaking messy. I had a purity ring even.
Oh,
It was somewhere in the range of when Worldwide Church of God was kind of dying off or crumbling in our local thing, and our parents were leaving it. And I decided to strike out on my own and be a rebel and go to the evangelical church.
that's being a rebel. Okay.
Ooh, I know, I was edgy. Sticking with that kind of carried over into college, and I got a little bit involved in Campus Crusade and then Chi Alpha, which was a Assemblies of God based youth ministry or
Mhm.
college ministry. And that, I was very vulnerable to that after our upbringing. So the whole purity thing and being pure and waiting till marriage was such a thing at that time that I was holding on to that as a point of self-righteousness, honestly, because I hadn't done it officially, right?
Oh, it made
I
you
mean,
closer to God, huh?
totally. I mean, it's gross now thinking about the mental
Mm.
gymnastics that I had to put around my actual activities to try to balance, what God wanted with what a
Oh,
boyfriend wanted. And I didn't know what
goodness.
I wanted. Like, I didn't literally, if someone had asked me what I wanted, I didn't know. But what I wanted was security. And what I was told was security came through having a man in your life. And
Yep.
by the culture, it looked like having a man in your life meant opening your legs. And
Oh,
so,
really?
or the promise of that. And so
Yes.
that was all I understood. And it wasn't even like I was that calculated about it. It was like that was just what made me do anything I was doing. What
Mm-hmm.
made me pick the clothes I picked, what made me, you know what I mean? Like all these things I think were unconsciously done with that as the goal because that's what I understood would make me safe. And I
Yeah.
cannot come back to that enough because what drives any of us for any of those things ultimately come back to our emotional needs, which are underpinned by our need for safety, security, food, water, shelter. Like we are such a
Mhm.
lizard brain and we've just layered up all these things on top of it, but that's all
Yes.
we are when we strip it down. I do think that it was a big drawback for me to actually not have sex in college. Because those relationships then that I had in college, it was like they never got to be full adult relationships. And now
Mm-hmm.
I know that sounds weird, but it's like part of being a human is to engage in sex. It's like eating. Like, yeah, you don't do it 3 times a day necessarily.
No.
Shout out to the aces in the crowd. Also
Ah,
part of the
yes, yes.
spectrum, asexuals. I see you. I guess in a way it kept those relationships that I was having while I was actually an adult and of a sexually mature age, like biologically speaking, it kept them kind of like childlike. And so,
Mm-hmm.
like, that aspect of myself just didn't get a chance to develop then. But as we said, my husband was a good Christian boy too. So we got married when he was 31, and I'd been his first girlfriend, and we kissed for the first time at the altar. So that was a whole experience for both of
Yep.
us. But, we had somewhat different backgrounds sexually, even though I hadn't actually done it officially. But, we'd each had our own sexual experiences. And different but similar upbringings that were repressive in their own way. And we brought all of that into our bedroom. You can't help but have that happen, And so, like, there was a lot of shame and things to work through. And sometimes still, it's like hard to open up about something or to be totally relaxed or in my body or at ease or
Isn't there some notion out there that good Christian girls are sometimes the freakiest in bed because
well,
they've been so repressed that they've just wanted to
mhm.
go out and experiment? I guess that's what happened to me too.
That's totally how we are as humans, I think. Yeah, when we're
Yeah, I
blocked
think
out
it's
from
normal.
something and repressed,
Hmm.
we're gonna have like a counterpoint to that happen.
Right. You tell us not to do something, that's likely the first thing we're going to want to go and do.
Along the way, repression and awkwardness and mixed feelings about it all. I've worked pretty hard to try to get more comfortable in my own skin. And so about 10 years ago, I started participating in this naked goddess swim.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. I didn't intend to, but the first year I participated, it turned out that a photo taken of me, it was me and my two friends sitting on the dock just after the swim, looking out over
Mhm.
the city lights, because literally it's in the river that's right down the center of the city. This photo got taken, and it's just our butt cracks is the only, questionable
Oh,
part that's visible. But
I
we
saw it.
became the poster child, right? Like that picture got used to advertise it for the next few years. So I was like, oh my God, I just felt kind of amazing about that.
Well,
It
yeah,
was
my sister's
really,
ass just out. I mean, you also live in a city where people have naked bike rides going through the city too, so it's pretty
it's true.
amazing.
It's
Yes.
true.
I was just
Anyway.
in Austin, Texas, where they have Barton Springs pool, which it's top optional. So kudos to the city of Austin. Good for them. It's pretty
Mm-hmm.
amazing. It's very freeing. I love it. And
Right.
why not? Why not? Put yourself out there if you want to. Again, if there's a concern of like drawing sexual attention to yourself, oh, boobies are out. Well, that sounds like it's not our problem. It sounds like boys, not the phrase boys will be boys, but the phrase boys will be held accountable for their actions.
Yeah, let's go with that one. Yikes. Well, but you realize what an American problem the whole nipple thing is.
Apparently,
In
I don't
Europe,
even know the big
it's
deal.
just, yeah, at beaches, at whatever swimming places in Europe, you're
Hmm.
equally as likely to see a woman with her top off and top on, and no one gives a shit.
Right.
And women breastfeed their babies, and no one's trying to put a blanket over their baby's head like people seem to expect here.
Yeah, again, that's something that I think goes back to the Puritans too. It's so like the sanitary culture. It's numbing.
Women for several generations were stopped from breastfeeding and told, "Ew, that's gross. That you're not an animal. Here, you don't want to do that. Here, use
Pretty
our
sure we
shiny
are.
bottles and buy our expensive fucking formula."
Oh yeah, it all goes back to marketing. And pretty sure we are animals, by the way.
I'm
Last we
pretty
checked.
sure we are. Well,
So
we
fuck all the
just
way off.
arrived at capitalism, so we're doing this conversation right, if you ask me.
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
but I do want to take a moment and acknowledge that I really think there's a lot of adults in this country who
Mhm.
can't acknowledge or even honestly, let alone start to unpack and heal their own sexual trauma because
Right.
they're actively enforcing those ideals on their own kids right now.
Oh,
They're doing it because that's all they know, right? But if
yeah,
they
yeah.
allowed themselves to see how it wasn't great that it happened to them, that
Mhm.
would then implicate them now because they've done this to their children. But they were victims first, and
Mhm.
they were victimized early on, and they're still being victimized by that system even as they're passing it along to their kids.
Hmm. Cognitive dissonance is really a thing, especially in the US. I mean, if someone realizes that they've been wrong, man, they stick to their guns, don't they? They don't want to change their tune. They will just create lies on top of lies and convince themselves that it's true so that they can be correct, so that they can be right.
I have to think that this oddly might go back to manifest destiny and all of the American exceptionalism BS that got built on top of it since then. I feel like
That's
that
very
is
interesting.
still why we can't accept that we're wrong and that we needed to try again, learn from our mistakes, because we learn
Yeah.
the most when things go wrong, and yet we think it means we're sinful. That's
Yep.
puke, puke, puke.
No, you're right. I think it goes back to sin too. The fear of being wrong. Like it went back to the whole like our childhood and asking questions. We don't ask questions. We just feel stupid for not knowing something. So I guess we're just not going to know the answer.
That's how
But
school works.
we're supposed to know. I know. School these days
Red
too.
marks on it. Well, and I actually think there's a little bit of starting to get past that. But yeah, the whole idea that you get a bad grade because you got something wrong because you couldn't memorize it is like being faulted for getting something wrong. I take an issue with because we do learn the most when things go wrong. That's how we like how modern design and things work, not modern design, but like industrial design or product design, everything is
Mm-hmm.
iterative, right? So we try the thing that seems like it's the best right now, knowing that it might not all go right. And when inevitably things don't go right, we go, hey, great. That's the thing we need to change then in our next version. And you keep doing that
Mm-hmm.
until you've worked through the bugs that pop up and you've got something that's really working and serving well. And but you to get there, you have to let go of, oh crap, that didn't work because, oh crap, that
Yeah.
didn't work is how you get to the right thing. And I don't think that's any different with us developing as humans. That's how we're doing it too.
Mm-hmm.
And we just really derail it when we add shame to that mix.
Ah, and there's
It's
so much
so
shame there to
destructive.
unravel
I
too.
know.
I had a Christian friend say to me once, to like, I was dating this dude in college, sleeping with him, and she said something to me once, like uber Christian, like going to mega church. And by this point, I think I had pretty much gotten out, but I don't know if she thought she could somehow bring me back into the fold, but it wasn't going to happen. But she made it seem like I was giving something up, something so precious I was giving up. And I think society needs to get over that idea. Stop looking at women as having sex as like giving a part of themselves up. I had
Mhm.
another Christian woman say to me once, so like when you sleep with a man who's not your husband, they dump all of their nasty crap like anxiety and everything, just all that gets put onto you. She literally believed that, Patty, that whatever was going on with the male would somehow get transferred to the woman because she slept with him. Yeah.
That sounds
What
like
a
new
way.
age witchy shit.
Yeah. But what a way to scare young girls into like not having sex, right?
Or was that a euphemism for STDs?
Oh gosh.
I mean,
Who
if they're not
knows?
at a place where they can talk honestly about the risks, like the
Mhm.
actual real risks
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
especially unprotected sex, I think it's worth having a conversation about the psychological risks of
Hmm.
sex, protected or not, right? Because I do think that's a thing, but I
Right.
also think if women are in a place where they know that they own their own bodies and they're not having sex in order to gain affirmation, then I'm so much less concerned about that. Like I'm so much
Right.
less concerned about a woman going out and like having sex with a dozen people in one night,
Hmm.
right? Because if a woman respects herself,
Yeah.
like I think it's very few women that will choose to engage in that without it being a trauma response.
But that's why people need to feel open to be able to discuss these things. Have you ever seen the movie OMG 2? I want to say it's a Hindi film. I mean, it's made in India, but I think I had mentioned that one too. You don't have to see the first film, but the second one was incredible. So it's called OMG 2, and it takes place in India. Basically, just to give you the synopsis, a young boy is caught at the school masturbating in the bathroom, and some kids come along and they go up top of the open section of the bathroom stall and record him. And then you know how social media works. It goes viral. It goes everywhere. And all of a sudden it has everyone talking about it. And the poor little boy is just in tears. He felt such embarrassment, such shame. And I was so angry for like the first quarter of the film, because of what they were doing to him and making how they were making him feel just for exploring his own body in his own privacy. But it did start a conversation in the movie, and I really liked the outcome of it. All of a sudden, kids started coming out and saying, well, we want these kind of discussions. Young women came up and like, I want to talk about periods. I want to talk about how masturbation works. I want to know about
Oh,
STDs. And it was a really beautiful movie. I thought it was really well done. Well, I really like Indian films anyway, but this was a good one correlating directly with this topic. And I think it's really worth seeing, not just for anyone. It would have been great in US too, but in India, where I don't even think they have like sex education, a class. I don't think they do. I think my husband told me they don't. Maybe in some of the bigger cities like Mumbai, maybe they do that kind of thing, but I really don't think, even in this country though, sex education is not, I don't think, what it should be. I know the things
sure.
have changed over the years, but definitely have to have more open and honest conversations about the things that we want to know, so we don't think that we're over here being complete weirdos, so that we know how our periods work, so that we know what sexual assault looks like or grooming looks
Yes.
like. That's very
Yes.
important, especially for children. And I'm sorry, but I think a child, no matter how young they are, they should know what rape is, because they can sometimes be the most vulnerable, and they
Yep.
have to recognize it when it comes, not what a healthy hug is from like a relative. They should know what an unhealthy hug or an unhealthy touch is from someone who should not be touching them, and what to do if it does happen, how to
Yep.
protect themselves.
Yep.
And that extends into adulthood because, I mean, let's face it, a lot of adults don't know either.
And when abstinent, I
Sometimes we're
know we
teaching.
said this before, but it is worth saying again. When abstinence only is taught,
Mhm.
those children are left totally vulnerable
Hmm.
to predators who understand that their innocence is
Yes.
the predator's power and they can be told anything.
And grooming is a thing.
And it's not done by trans people just trying to fucking live.
You take, for example, you know the channel Girl Defined on YouTube, right?
Hmm.
I know we have reacted to some of their cringy videos. So that's two evangelical, I want to say sisters,
Sisters.
but in another spot, I seem to remember they're saying they were best friends since childhood. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's their
I,
shtick. They're sisters.
okay,
Yeah.
I guess they're sisters. But anyway, they
At least we're honest
highly.
about the fact that we were enemies when we were little.
That's okay. I don't even think we were enemies. I think you were just, you had a lot of anger to get out, and I was a safe space for you.
I'm
Obviously, you
sorry,
felt I was safe
Nancy.
to be around. Patty, you're perfectly fine. It was me and our brother that hung out, but look at us. We're great friends, and we're sisters and friends. Yeah, it
I'm
worked out
lucky.
fine
I'm lucky.
because you kind of took over the role of playing mom when my mother was not around. Not that I ever felt comfortable talking to her about anything anyway, but I was on my own at 17, and you literally watched out for me, Pat, so I appreciate that. But yeah, getting back to Girl Defined, I mean, they highly promote purity culture, and they view things like feminism as this attack on biblical womanhood, they call it. It's Oh, these two are about as cringy as you can possibly get. And you would watch their videos and think it's a joke. It's not, it's real. So obviously, their view of biblical womanhood, traditional roles of, the wife in the household, and they see feminism as kind of this, I don't know what you'd call it. I know there's different ways that you can look at feminism. I remember seeing a woman hold up a sign, like a protest sign, saying, I'm the doctor that my parents wanted me to marry. And that to me is a beautiful example of what feminism is. I'm sorry, but you tell me I have to marry some man so that I can be defined by him? No, guess what? I defined myself. I put myself through college and got my PhD, and I am the doctor now. So fuck off. That's how I view feminism.
So amazing. I think
Yeah.
feminism, I just came across the idea that feminism has had eras to it, right? Ones where it was like trying to be more like a man, and ones where it was like pushing farther on the sexual front, and like different phases of
Yeah.
feminism. So I don't know. I
Well,
think it becomes a buzzword that then polarizes people and no one can actually talk about the concepts that they mean when they each are just
yes.
using the word feminism to like punch from behind.
Hmm. Well, and definitions are tricky. Everyone kind of
Yeah.
has a different definition. Even with the term atheism, I still don't like the fact that I am called an atheist, even though if the definition is someone who's just not convinced that God exists, then yeah, that's me. But then you have Christians that look at the term as like, these are the Antichrist, these are Satan worshipers.
Right,
Like,
right.
that is not the definition at all. And so it can get tricky. Same with feminism. People will appropriate that term for their own use and turn it into something terrible.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, I think we've covered a lot of this, Patty. It was a heavy topic, but again, to everyone listening, you can always reach out to Patty and myself at apostatesisters@gmail.com if you ever wanted to maybe share your story or be able to work through some of those traumas so that you can reclaim yourself, reclaim your bodily autonomy. And if anyone wants to seek out some other information and support, you could go to the website recoveringfromreligion.org. That's another great group of people over there that help people through some things that they might be battling, traumatic experiences from being in a religious organization and how to move forward. So thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again next week. All right, bye.